I'm just hanging out. I'm just hanging out. I'm mainly known for the rough raps, but kids steal my lyrics like hubcaps and eat them like stacks of flapjacks like rugrats.
Welcome back. Thank you for checking out this bonus edition of the 12 Kyle podcast. I'm 12 Kyle. Check this out. On this podcast, what we're going to talk about is hanging out. Now, I came to this topic because I was going through some things and I stumbled across my old senior book. Now, there's some of you that may be wondering, what is a senior book? I've never heard of a senior book. Well, way back in the day, back in my day, you had a high school yearbook, and then you also had a senior book. The senior book obviously were for high school seniors, and it was a kind of a diary, if you will, or documentation thing that you could use to document the events of your senior year. And it's something that, most people, particularly in my age group, loved and cherished. And so I stumbled across the old senior book, and I was going through, just kind of thumbing through, looking at it and laughing at some of the things that people said and things of that nature, and laughing at some of the pictures. And I came across a question that said, like, where do you like to hang out? And I was like, I've hung out at a lot of different places. So I wanted to get on here and talk briefly about like hanging out. Now, obviously, when you were little, you're in elementary school and middle school, hanging out would just consist of being outside, which is cool because I grew up in the era before the internet, right? So in the 80s and 90s, the place to be was outside. Like if you were outside, you were hanging. It didn't matter where you were hanging at, as long as you were outside. Outside was always popping. I don't care where you were. I don't care if you lived in the hood. I don't care if you lived in the suburbs. Outside was always popping. It wasn't cool to be in the house. But by the time that I got to high school, I was able to venture, obviously, not only outside of the house, but out of the yard and into the neighborhood and, subsequent neighborhoods as well. One of the places I liked to hang out was my boy Jay Fresh's crib. Jay Fresh it was interesting because in high school, before I think this might have been like our sophomore year, Jay Fresh was really getting into music really heavy by the time we got to middle school. And he would, buy records and stuff like that and tapes. And his parents didn't really want to hear the music that he was playing. So what they did was, and his room was right next to their room. So what his parents did was they built onto their house, and they built him a room over like a 2-car garage. And so his room went from being next door to theirs to over the garage. And it was like a studio apartment. Like he had his bed in there. He had a refrigerator. He had, TV, phone, the whole nine. So, other than, coming to eat dinner or breakfast, he really didn't have any need to come kick it with his parents. And so, I love going over there because of the isolation, man. Me and Fresh would just go over there and just kick it and bug out, have friends over and all kind of stuff. And we used to get into shenanigans. And the cool part about going to Fresh's crib was like, I could tell my mom I'm going to Jay Fresh's crib and it would be no questions. Now, I will admit, there were times where I told my mom I was going to Jay Fresh's crib, and I did, but I went like 4 other places before I went there. But that was a hangout spot for me. What else? We couldn't. You ever had like friends, like close friends, like you couldn't go to their house and hang out? Like one of my boys, my boy Rudy, you couldn't hang out at Rudy's house. Like Because Rudy's mom, and I love Rudy's mom to death. Rudy's mom was like mad strict, mad mean, and so like, so like, you couldn't like just go over there and play Atari or nothing like that. Like she was just like, if she come in the house, man, the house got to be spotless. You know what I'm saying? Like shoes lined up at the door, all kind of. You can't be sitting on her good furniture. And so like I remember just a couple of times being at Rudy's crib, and like his mom came home from work. And she just ran us up out of there. She was like, "Get those little nappy head boys out of my living room." So you couldn't hang there. Another place that we used to hang real hard at was fast food restaurant by the name of Hardee's. Now, Hardee's is, I think, more of a regional thing. It's more of the South. I guess if you're out west, it's very similar to Carl's Jr. I will admit Hardee's didn't have the best of food. But here's the thing. Like, we didn't even hang at Hardee's. It was, hey, man, what are we doing tonight? Are we hanging at Hardee's? Hardee's on 52. That's what we would call it. Hardee's on 50. It was never hanging at Hardee's. It was never we're going to Hardee's. It was Hardee's on 52, which 52 meant Highway 52, which runs and actually intersects Interstate 95. But yeah, we would go hang at Hardee's on 52. And here's the funny thing. We would go to Hardee's on 52 and we'd almost never go inside. Like we would just stay in the parking lot and parking lot pimp. Like after a game, where y'all going? Hey, we're going to Hardee's on 52. After a dance, hey, where y'all going? We're going to Hardee's on 52. And surprisingly, it was never, our hanging out was rarely broken up by the cops. You know, it's just, I mean, just imagine just a parking lot full of black kids, you know, just you'd be in your car for a little while, then you get out your car and you're walking around and you're just in the parking lot. Like, and I mean, Hardee's still has, you know, at this particular time, they're still having cars in the drive-thru and stuff. And we're just out there, just Hardee's on 52. And I mean, I gotta tell you, like I grew up in a small town, Florence, South Carolina. So it wasn't a big place, but and it wasn't really a lot of places for, you know, teenagers to hang out at. But Hardee's on 52 was the spot. The last place where almost everybody hung out, where I got tired of hanging out, my house. My house was the hangout spot. And by the time I graduated from high school, even when I got to college, it was still the hangout spot. And it was annoying to me because I was ready to get away from the house and people would just end up at my house. A couple of things about my house. One, with, you know, my mother and my aunt being there, you know, it was a house where, you know, everybody was welcome. So it wasn't like you couldn't come over or anything like that. We had a pool, so we would swim. We had, you know, a nice sized driveway and a basketball goal. So, you know, we get, you know, you really could play like 4-on-4. It was that wide, but we normally play 3-on-3 in the driveway. And so, and the games at my house were, the pickup games at my house, basketball games were legendary. And that was like, especially in the summertime. In the summertime, when I was in high school, it was almost an everyday thing. Like people would just show up and we'd start playing basketball, or they'd show up and we'd go swimming, or they'd show up and we'd just be just hanging in our den. Like it was, it was just a place to be, man. And my friends loved to come over. And it's not that I didn't want them to come over because we had more than enough space. But it was just like, damn, man, I'm trying to get out the house. Because I distinctly remember one time I came home from college. It was home for the summer. And I was on some like, man, what we doing tonight? And so fellas came over. We played basketball that day. It was a Sunday. We played basketball pretty much from like 6 to like 9 until it got dark. Cats went home and showered. They came back like an hour later. It's like eight cars in my driveway. I'm like, what are we doing tonight? I was like, I'm trying to go out. I'm trying to go to the movies or something. I'm trying to do something. Go to the bowling alley. Nah, man, we just come here to kick it. So my house became the hangout spot, and I got tired of it, but it was still cool because I love being around my crew. But yeah, my house. You ask any of my friends. My house was the hangout spot almost every single day. Now, when I got to college, I went to college at South Carolina State University, which was about 90 miles away from my hometown, right? Once I got on the campus of South Carolina State University, hangout spot was the dorm. I did a podcast on it. Legendary dorm that unfortunately is no longer there. Bethea Hall. Bethea Hall was everything. Like there was always something going on inside or outside Bethea Hall. It could be a water fight. It could be, anything. It could be a fight. I mean, it could be somebody getting slapped. It could be, cats outside shooting dice. It could be, chicks just standing around. Just, somebody put a speaker in the window and now you got a party in the courtyard. I mean, like any and everything was going on at Bethea Hall and I loved it. You feel free to check out that podcast. It's called Bethea Hall once you finish this podcast. Another hangout spot for me was Belcher Hall. Belcher Hall was the School of Business, where the School of Business was located. I went to school. I was a marketing major. And so I spent a lot of time in Belcher Hall. I spent so much time in Belcher Hall. I feel like there should be a plaque with my name on the wall somewhere in that building because I spent countless hours in Belcher Hall. I had a professor, man, and I couldn't stand this dude, man. This professor, now I'm going to take you guys back a little bit. You know how like people now have their own computers or whatever like that, your laptops. Well, back then I had my own word processor. And a lot of people didn't have their own word processors. They had your basic typewriter, whatever the case was. And so this professor was so anal that he said that any work that you turned in from his class had to be typed up in the Belcher computer lab. It could not be from your word processor. It couldn't be from your typewriter. Nobody had their own, personal computer or laptop back in 92. So, because they really weren't invented at the time. So yeah, he was anal like that. So you had to go to Belcher. You had to go to the lab, the computer lab, and if the computer lab closed at 11, and let's say you didn't get your work done, you couldn't turn in work. You couldn't type it up on your own or on someone else's word processor or something like that, or even in another lab. I'm like, does Belcher have like special paper or something like that? He was just anal. But anyway, spent a lot of time in the School of Business. Shout out to the School of Business. That was like my home away from home. Loved a lot of the professors. No love for that punk ass professor. But anyway, and as many of you know, I played football when I was at South Carolina State. And so I spent most of my time, I can't even really call it hanging out, but at Oliver C. Dawson Stadium, Willie Jeffries Field, spent a lot of blood, sweat, and tears. I can't really say that was a place that I hung out, but that's the place where I was at most of the time. I was either at practice or I was at Belcher, one of the two. Really the three. I was either at Bethea in my room, or I was at Belcher getting work done, or in class, or I was at, the stadium practicing. So, of course there were hangout spots on campus everywhere, like the pit, the dining halls and stuff like that. And I hung out in those spots, but honestly, if I wanted to kick it, I could say one other place that I kicked it real hard at was outside Truth Dining Hall. We used to call it the Ave. I used to be on the Ave all the time. In fact, I missed quite a few classes once it got, warm, just out there just checking out the chicks. and my grades reflected it. But yeah, that was the places we hung out at. And then obviously, after you graduate from college, I graduated in 96. The summer of 1997, I moved to the city of Atlanta, which is where I still reside. And so I'm a young adult in the city. I'm new, I'm fresh, young, pocket full of money, no responsibilities, no parenting, no nothing. And so I hung out a lot, and it was mostly in clubs. And I think one of the things that was interesting about living here, particularly in 97, even in 98 as well, was that for the first year, I didn't know anybody. It was just me and my boy Jay Fresh. We moved here together and lived together. We had a townhouse in Marietta, which is like a northern suburb. And we spent most of our time hanging out downtown. So I had to familiarize myself with the city that I just moved to. And, obviously as time progressed, downtown was just my spot to hang out. I spent a lot of time in clubs, Club SO, Club Kaya. What was the other joint? Oh man, we had a run at Club Dragonfly and Whiskey Peach. We were in Whiskey Peach in the quote unquote VIP. I don't even know what we're doing at VIP because we never paid to get in there. We just got over there and just stood on couches and stuff while they were playing music. We were literally in VIP in Whiskey Peach every week, every Friday night. Oh man, this was like the early 2000s. So yeah, I spent a lot of time hanging out in clubs, restaurants for sure. Did a lot of restaurants because I like to eat, and we have some great restaurants here in the city of Atlanta. And of course, I mean, what would be Atlanta without hanging out sometimes at the shoe show, at the shoe model establishments, aka the strip clubs. Man, Magic City, obviously, Goosebumps, Strokers, Pinups, the Blue Flame. Shout out to Club Nikki, which is no longer here, and the world famous Gentlemen's Club. Yeah, it was some good times hanging out in some of those spots as well. And now 40 plus club, I'm washed, if you will. So when you're in your 40s, man, and you got kids and you're done doing all of the crazy stuff and wild stuff that you do, I'm washed. So I'm at the place where I hang out is here at my crib. I got, a couple of TVs and, so I watch TV a lot. I'm really, especially now that we're in this global pandemic that we've been in at the time of this recording for the last 18 months, I'm really not going anywhere. But, prior to the Rona, I'd hang out. But for the most part, I think, my hanging out would consist of, being in restaurants. I haven't been in a club in a minute because I'm not here for the, playing Uzi Vert all night. I'm not here for that. I got to hear some music. Because I'm one of the few people that you probably know that when I would go to clubs, I go for the music. I'm not going, because I'm married, I'm not going to pick up no chicks. I'm going for the music, and I literally would go to Club Visions and go in the middle of the dance floor and dance my ass off by myself, when it was jumping, when the music was cool. But, I'm not into listening to little scrappy B-sides. I'm sorry. But, now that we're in the pandemic, hanging out consists of me just being at the crib. I'm sitting, either in my living room or I'm sitting on the deck. I spent this last year, a lot of time on my deck outside, which has really been a pleasant surprise. I've forgotten how cool it is to sit outside. But, once football season rolls around, I'm in front of the TV on Saturdays and Sundays. I'm parked. I make sure whatever errands that I need to do get done, whatever loose ends need to be tied up, get tied up, and I am parked on the couch in front of the TV watching football all day Saturday and definitely all day Sunday after church, obviously. But yeah, those are just some of the places where I hang out. At some point, hopefully we'll get out of this pandemic and, I'll hang out a little bit. I've finally gotten to the point now where I'll, go out to dinner, but I feel comfortable outside. I don't feel comfortable, being around a lot of people in large groups in a large, arena or something like that. So, we'll see how the pandemic continues to go or not go. But yeah, that's me hanging out. That's what I do. So just had to drop that with y'all. Thanks again for checking out this bonus edition of the 12 Kyle podcast. I'm your boy 12 Kyle. I will catch you guys next time. 5 stacks.